Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Oh, hi. Hi. If you can all have a seat, we'll get started. Yeah? Do I need to shout? No? All right. Hello, everybody. Some new faces, some old faces. Nice to have you here. This is the Game Designer Meetup. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about merge games. We're going to dive into that. We have Ari Kuokka, who's going to talk about Merge Mansion. And then myself, I'll go into the post-mortem of Merge Friends. A couple of practicalities. Well, I don't know. It's pretty clearly marked. I always say this just in case, but the toilets are just straight and to the right. I think that's there's that one, and then where was the other one? There is one in the back somewhere. You'll find it. And then, yeah, we'll go through the presentations. We'll have around 10 minutes of questionnaires, Q&A session, and then we'll have food at the end. We'll do like mingling and no programs, but just like hey networking and meeting people. So yeah, let's get started. So yes, at the beginning, well, actually, I'll just run through. Go through that. We went to the schedule. I would like to first say thank you to Nitro Games for hosting this event, and then I'll have Kride, who can talk a little bit more about Nitro. Yeah, the red one. Sorry.
Now it's working. Whoa! Yay! Yes. I'm Krede. I'm one of the helping hands behind the scenes here. You might have seen me at other ones of these. And this time I went up to our beautiful head of people operations, Milka, through Slack, not in person, and was like, hey, could you please help us with like 25 to 50 euros so we can get some snacks for our event? And she was like, would you get better snacks for 100 euros? And so we have better snacks for 100 euros. So yes, and so I'm from Nitro Games. We're a company that's been around for 15 years now. We have 2 games out there, Nerf Super Blast, which you heard about from Alex, and then Autogun Heroes, which is now in soft launch. And yes, come talk to me if you want to know more, and have a nice evening.
One small thing. For those of you at home who are watching the stream, if you have questions, feel free to write them in the stream at any point. Then during the Q&A session, we'll go through those. So feel free to write anything, and then we'll take a look at the questions. All right. So for our next guest here, we have Ari Kuokka, who will talk about Merge Friends. Welcome, Ari.
Who? Test. Okay. All right. Great to be here. Just, um, Hi, I'm Ari. Uh, I work as a design lead at Metacore. Um, First official games job, 2012, as a junior marketing manager, company called Grand Crew back then. So I guess we all have our skeletons in our closet. These are the few games that I worked in my career. One of them, I guess, the biggest ones. Most of these I worked as design lead or game lead. Oh yeah, and a quick disclaimer. So the views and opinions in this presentation are entirely my own and do not necessarily represent the views of Metacore. Yeah, currently I'm the design lead at merch management team. I joined the company like 2 years ago when the team was like 11 people, and now we're like 72, 73. We've grown quite a lot. It's been a ride. But yeah, go forward. So first, I'll talk a little bit about design theory, and then walk you through about our like design philosophy and design pillars, and then finally we go to the intrinsic motivation and how do we use that in the design in merge management. But before that, long time ago there was an issue, and I was baffled by this. Like, why does certain kinds of features like have no impact to game's performance or retention? And like I'm sure like we all been there. Like we do, we go to soft launch or the game is already like live, and we do our best guess. Like, hey, this feature obviously this is gonna have an impact. Like at the time, we were working on one game and we did like a daily reward system, and we thought like hey, free rewards, it's cool. Like let's give it every day for the next month, and obviously it's gonna have an impact on the retention. Cool. No, it did not have any impact. The same actually can be said about even tutorial. But a little bit later, more about this. There's also much recently I came across of another design problem, and this is about merge management. And I was thinking like, what should happen after player finally reaches their goal after 3 to 6 months, and it's quite a long grind. And what would be appropriate? Like we could give gems or some normal reward, but would it be like 6 months is quite a long time? And what would be kind of this elegant solution that wouldn't cause other issues such as inflation to the economy and so forth? The answer to these will come a little bit later, as you might guess. So first, let's go to a little bit of marketing theory before we go to the actual design theory. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this term called marketing myopia, but it was first introduced by Theodore Lewitt in 1960s in the Harvard Business Review. And what this basically means is like companies, like they have this, or they get into this mode of having too narrow focus on short-term goals, and pretty much like they focus too much on the wants and not take into account the actual like needs of their customers. And there are some famous examples about this happening to several companies. Like, for example, Kodak lost most of his market share to Sony back when digital cameras came. Like they were focusing too much on the analog stuff still. And for example, Nokia lost to Apple. Everyone knows that. And this is my favorite, the railroads. And this is actually the man, Theodore, by himself, that he used this example that they lost to the other means of transportation because they thought they were in the railroads business rather than in the transportation business. And what is notable here is that at the time when they were losing their market share, the actual market of transportation grew exponentially. So like they really didn't thought about what are the actual needs of their like customers in this case. All right. Then if you talk about the intrinsic motivation, that's when that refers to the drive to engage in behavior activity because it is inherently enjoyable and fulfilling. This is a strong predictor for long-term retention for the player. And extrinsic motivation comes from the external factors such as rewards or punishments, or the desire to attain certain outcome. And this is a short-term effect on the player engagement. And the players may play the game for the rewards, but if they do not find the game enjoyable or fulfilling, they are likely to churn. Quite simple. This is our day 30 retention, which is, I'd say, like industry standards, it's pretty good. So like our intrinsic motivation in the merge management kind of works well. I'd say. How this all kind of comes together is through these core needs according to the self-determination theory. And there's the competence, the autonomy, and then the relatedness. And two of the topmost ones, I think those work really well with the merge games overall. Feeling of effective in the acting the world and achieving desired outcomes, and then the autonomy experience in sense of choice and psychological freedom when the player gets to do their merges in the order they want and gets to discover their way around the game. And intrinsic motivation are driven by our needs, and then the extrinsic motivations are fulfilling the wants of the player. So this is kind of finding this all nice together, like the marketing theory and then the kind of design theory behind this. It's kind of feels like quite basic theory, but often, at least by myself, and feels like as designers we kind of forget these basic things quite often, kind of losing the sight, getting to the marketing myopia. So merge management, how do we then use this in our design? So these are our design pillars. The first one is approachable, easy to pick up and learn, and things are revealed gradually. The second one is social connectivity, and players can find others who are alike and help each other. This is interesting in a way because we haven't almost at all yet tapped the potential in this with our merge management game. But let's see in the future. The discovery never ends. This is like the first one that really caters to the intrinsic motivation. Like what it basically means, this kind of feeling that we try to achieve for the player. I wonder what comes after, and there is always the new item chain that comes after the previous one, and kind of the merging should never end. Then there is the story and the mystery. Solving one mystery leads always to new unsolved questions, which is important, and then relaxing and coziness, and enjoyable and stress-free without asking too much. And the last three ones are pretty much like intrinsic motivational drivers, or made to boost or enhance the intrinsic motivation of the player, ultimately leading to the stronger long-term retention. And I think the coziness there is something that is interesting in the context of, how to say, like free-to-play economy, because a lot of that actually goes against the extrinsic motivations and the monetization strategies, because a lot of that is based on skipping time, or like there's a time limit or scarcity or things like that. So I think it's just important for us as a team to have that there, as that we are mindful about it, even though, like, yeah, we often need to work our way around it a bit. Then merge management itself, like these were our design pillars, and this is kind of the whole game is about mystery, the team, the premise of like that leads you to this moment that I want to find out more. Like examples of this is like the merge items themselves. Like what is really important is that we kind of never reveal what's the next item or where you can get particular item. The player needs to find out it by themselves. And like because a lot of, for example, casual games do it so that they kind of reveal everything. Like, hey, this is your goal, go there. But it leaves out the discovery and the autonomy of the player to actually, that they get the sense of competence and like discovering, oh, this is the next item and what's it's gonna be. And we kind of boost this also with having like a story with the, for example, here there's the love story. low story item chain. That then every item has a piece of story in it, and when you unlock the next one, you get the next piece of the story. Another example is we have a mansion which we keep closed. Great, right? So you kind of have it there, but you never get there, at least so far. And like, but that's the importance, that just having the mansion there's already a mystery. Okay, what's inside? Why is it there? What has happened? And another, I think, important thing we have is that we concentrate with the tasks almost entirely on like the player goals, that hey, these are things that you need to do, but at this level we don't even show like what you're gonna get after you complete it. And that's kind of my next point, is that after you tap the task that show it, then you can actually see the rewards, but the actual satisfaction of getting things fixed and another task is the actual reward. And the rewards given from the actual task, I think I would argue that they are actually quite irrelevant. We actually early in the game tested this thing, or kind of by an accident tested this, because we had a lot of the tasks done quite fast, and we kind of just threw in some rewards, like 1 XP from a task that took like 6 weeks to complete, which is a little bit lackluster. But then we fixed it. There was no change whatsoever in the KPIs or anything. Like, the reward for the player is that they complete the task, they get whatever they wanted to do done, and they get the next task. And I think that's why is that? Like, this is the thing. Like, they satisfy the players. The rewards satisfy the players' wants, which are driven by the short-term extrinsic motivation. And this is exact reason why, for example, the daily calendar had no impact, because like even though it's more rewards and the player can see that, okay, I come more to the game, I can get more of these rewards. But if the ground or the base need to come into the game, the intrinsic motivation is not there. That feature itself is not going to change that at all. Like, those players who care about the rewards and have that need, they're going to come in, but it's not going to change for those players who don't care about those rewards at all. Like, they're not going to come in for more of that. And for example, in the case of tutorial, like, that interesting, there's so many ways of like making a tutorial, but if we use as an example like a forced tutorial, which is quite a standard in many mobile games, that okay, you need to do this and that, and it's nice because you get your funnel, the data is there like in a nice, you can look at it in a very nice place because the steps don't happen in the wrong order, anything, it's always the same. But let's say then that stops and there's a step tag. You can see that the players, like 80% of players get it, but 20% of players don't get what you try them to do. And then, okay, the quick solution to fix that would be that, hey, let's add another forced step here. And then you get 100% true. Cool, that's great. Okay, there's always a portion of players who don't get it for some reason, even if it's forced. I don't know what, they drop or something. And but what happens there is that for those, you get the 20% more get through, which is great, but 80% that actually got it, they actually had the kind of like, they experienced the sense of autonomy, and they got the discovery and the competence because they figured it out on their own. But suddenly they don't get that because it's a forced step. So they have less autonomy, or actually we take it completely away, and then like they lose the discovery and everything, which means that actually those players have like lower intrinsic motivation to go on, which kind of results in then lower retention. And even the 20% who get through that, it's great, but even they are kind of suffering that there's no like discovery or sense of autonomy for them at all. So maybe something to think about next time doing a tutorial. Okay, a little bit more like detailed issues in merge mansion. Not issue actually. This is I'd say like a golden moment. We have few of those in merge mansion, and so first there's this. I assume that you guys know how merge games work and how merge management works, so that you first have your level 1 stack of seeds, then you merge them to level 2, then you merge them to level 3, and you get the final to level 4. And what happens then is that you get to tap it 12 times. You get seeds out of it. Cool. Kind of makes sense. You have a pack of seeds, you get seeds. But what happens then is that you get a empty seed pack. Whoa. But that kind of, it makes sense, because we could have made the producer just disappear and you get a next one. But instead you get left with this like empty seed pack. And once the player plays a little bit forward, they realize that, oh, I can merge these two. And this is I think one of those like precious moments we have in this game, where this kind of subconscious train of thought of the player goes like, oh, okay, if this works this way, it kind of makes sense, and I can merge even this. So what else is there in this game that I get to discover still, even though there wouldn't be anything else acting like this, but they don't know that. So this is, I think, quite a strong driver for the player to find more of these things and feeling competent and discovering new things. Okay, another example. So here we have a drawer item, quite small. Yeah, my apologies. But basically, you merge them forward, and you get to the items level on the white box there from level 4 to 7, and then they turn to producers. They produce bases, and then you merge them forward, and then they turn into producers, and you merge them, and you get flowers, and you get a bunch of stuff. It goes on and on and on. But like, there's this special moment, like if you waited half an hour with the level 1 vases, and there's actually this thing that you can tap it and you can break it, which produces shrapnel, and then it produces a locker. And obviously you can merge the shrapnel forward, and you get into this chain of like mosaic. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Patrick. And then the locker chain, then you can merge it forward. It becomes a clock, and then that clock becomes a portrait, and it starts this sort of like a love story chain. And this gets us to the design problem that we had earlier, that I presented. Like, it is a long chain. Both of these chains actually are so long that it might take 3 to 6 months for the players to grind until this far. And for a long time we had this in the game, like there was nothing. You reach the end and that's it. And it was like, what we should do, because easy solution would be that we give a reward. Like, let's give the player gems. But what amount of gems is enough if you grind for half a year? Like, quite a lot. And then, like, would that be still a good choice? Because, like, okay, we give a huge amount of gems, and what we get back is kind of inflation in the economy. Okay, we could give another chain. That's cool. But there's another problem in merge, like, 2 genre, especially, which is called board pressure. And because the board is quite small, you cannot have items forever and ever, because it gets cramped, and then you get into selling items, and that's not good. So how we solve this is that what we rewarded the player with is more gameplay, actually. So once the player reaches this level 3, the first like rows, we open this teaser that, hey, like you can see the item there that it says item required, discover the love story item to unlock this area. And once you get to the bottle of milk, then the area opens. And I think this was actually quite elegant solution. Of course, there's we need to produce a lot of content for just this kind of a discovery, but this is also a moment that once the player reaches the level 3 and we have this discovery, immediately this triggers the same kind of thought that, oh, like I found this one, so what else is there in the game that I can discover? Like, okay, I can go anywhere and like I can find this, and regardless of if there's anything or if there's more. But like, this is another this kind of a golden moment. And here's some data actually to back it up. We checked, like, there's the blue line, which is After this is actually portraying basically churn of the player. So, oh, the other side, the retention. So before there was nothing actually, like no reward. And then when we actually had this area, the retention rose roughly 2%. So it's working. And then few notes or issues about the game that we have, and I think these are actually quite specific to merged games, but these issues might be also quite specific to our game. But for example, here's a picture of one of our events. This is a Christmas event 2 years back, or like a snapshot of the board of it. The point with our stuff is that it kind of needs to make sense to be fun and for the world work as a coherent thing. So first there up corner you get bricks, and then you get to do your own chimney, and then you get to tap the chimney. It produces these Christmas like Santa's bags, cool. But also every now and then it also produces coal, like a piece of coal, which you can merge, and then you can of course use the coal to heat up the oven, and with the heated up oven you can produce cookies, cool. Also from the sack, once you empty it, you get gifts, but then you're left with this empty seed bag. I mean, empty, no, not a seed, sorry, Santa's bag, and then like every now and then, when you tap it, there's this unopened envelope that has been left on the bottom of the bag, like, like from Santa, like, and then when you tap it, of course, you get these Christmas cards, but also there's this wax seal, which you can then kind of use to make candles, which you can tap to light on, and then you can speed it up to melt the snowman over there. And when the snowman melts, you get this bottle of water, and then a scarf and a Twix, and when you tap it, you get the Twix and the scarf. Cool. It kind of works. But the downside with all of this is that it takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of design brainpower going into this, and kind of to make this really fun and working. Yeah, we need to really do this properly, and then it's really hard to kind of like reuse these, because like if we change, okay, let's risk in this, and the things changing, like nothing makes sense anymore. Like it's doable, but it's not very easy. But this is still, I would say, quite easy, because in our events, the tasks that you do, they don't actually need to match to anywhere. But here, if you look at the main game items, this is another kind of a issue produced by the meta that we have in the game, because you fix tasks in the actual world map, and once you use an item to it, the item kind of needs to make sense to be used in that task. For example, if there are leaves and you rake leaves, you probably need to use rake to do that. We kind of sometimes need to get a little bit creative with that, but what that also produces is that is the issue with these items that you guys can see those brackets in the middle. It basically means that the usable items in these both chains are those items inside that, because the early items are the player can produce them so quickly that the task is like done in a second, and then the items at the end side, they might take a month. Suddenly you're stuck, boom, there. So there's actually only small set of items that is usable, and then this is kind of also affecting partially the board game pressure we have. So and sometimes, yeah, because of the matching with the tasks, we really need to get creative. So here are some examples of what we had. Just took them from Reddit. Like using the vase as glasses, because that was the closest object we could have, and like too many empty seed bags used here and there, because they are quite handy. Whatever you need to take out from the any items you need to put somewhere, like just use those and so forth. And one of my favorite, which is also kind of because of how meta and our items are, is the gloves, because the gloves are byproduct of our main spawner, which is kind of like producing the garden tools. And sometimes there's a chance to get a glove, and the gloves only go up to level 3, but the actual chain goes up to level 14. And if we ask one of those items, there's gonna be so many gloves, like gonna kind of produce as a byproduct. So then we have a lot of tasks asking those. But there's an issue there also that when you actually get that task and you don't have it because it's a byproduct item, it's actually quite hard to get whenever you need it. So, things like that. Then recap. So fulfilling basic needs is the kind of key for solid retention. Building things on top of intrinsic motivation, but without forgetting the extrinsic ones, because the monetization is often driven by the extrinsic motivations, and feels like the balance between these two is it's actually crucial for any game to work properly. But when the needs are properly established, it makes it easier to build the ones on top of that. Like first, you need to have the needs, I think. And this is actually the marketing theory that needs and wants. I think it's very handy in like when I'm building a free-to-play economy, and especially the Tower of Want, because that's basically what it is. And yeah, it's just easy to kind of lose sight without this kind of a base theory in there. And when things happen that make sense to the player, it acts as a teaser of what to expect, like those golden moments that I showed you guys. Thank you. Do we have a time for questions? Whatever. Okay. Sounds good.
Hello. So a couple of questions, trying to keep it brief. So you mentioned something about the tutorials. And when I started the game for the first time, I noticed that the very first tutorial that you have felt very like, not condescending, but it was very like, this is a game. This is how you click things. And it was like, okay. And I got even like frustrated with that. But then when the first like story events dropped, there were no tutorials on those. And that was also frustrating. Like, what is this, like, what is happening here? So how do you juggle that with tutorials, like when you actually need it and when you're just gonna leave the player on their own to avoid that frustration and like help the player to actually like work around those?
That's a good question. I'm thinking, how do I answer politically correctly? No, I mean, I think the answer to that is like sort of conditional tutorial. That it's hard. It's way more work than like this guided tutorial, like forced step thing. But like then you can do things when you notice that the player is not understanding something. And obviously, some cases, even in our case, it can be that there's just like a bad UI or badly made UX, which can be also fixed. And I prefer like solving these kind of problems so that the game itself and the systems work so intuitively that there wouldn't even need to be one. But sometimes you need, and then I think it's like how to do that is then somehow like subconsciously try to nudge the player towards the right solution. But that is hard. Like it's way harder than just, hey, do this, boom, boom, next step.
Okay, thank you. And then another question about you talked a little bit about retention and how to keep players actually in the game. Like if you track that on like a event basis, like for an event, like how often do people get back to an event? Do you feel like you need to do corrective moves during those shorter events? Like you need to somehow do something with the design that, okay, people are dropping in. Like, do you look at that with events when they are ongoing?
Sorry, can you so the question is about, does the events
Yeah, so
affect
like
the
when you have events and you like, do you look at the retention for those events, and do you do corrective moves during the event if you see that the retention is dropping at a certain point in the event?
Well, technically that's possible, but I think it's then there's a question of like, is it fair for the players who, if we, let's say we change the economy of the event in the like when the event is already going, I think it's wrong then towards the other players who have invested a lot, and some players are gonna not like it, and I don't think that's why the events are kind of good, because there's an ending time to them. And then I think what we do is that we let it run, and then we look at the data and then try to do corrective move for the next event and try to avoid it rather than changing. Unless something is broken, then obviously it's good to fix that.
Hello. Thank you very much indeed. It was really, really interesting. Thank you. I wanted to kind of touch on. You mentioned that a really strong reward, specifically for the love story item, the milk bottle, was to reward the player with more gameplay. Do you have any tips for balancing like the need to provide more gameplay with the content treadmill and the development time required to produce that level of gameplay?
That is a very good question. Yeah, in our case, there's very real content treadmill in a way, but I think designing it well and then having a good tools is one way, and then obviously like merge genre is very great in that regard, because like how the merge math works is that, let's say from level, if we just add one item from level 12 to level 13, it doubles all the previous content, because the player needs to run through all of these levels to get to the next one. So that's like, I think it's quite brilliant in itself. Obviously there's still the board pressure issue, but like one good example of how to do this. But I think every game is kind of a unique and how you do things, but I think you can be quite smart in when designing sort of a feature, like how do you do content in their game. There can be done some smart decisions there, and not just go overboard with all the objects being unique every time, but like try to cycle them a bit or something like that. As long as it's fun for the player, they love it. Like I think that's the good goal there. Do we still have time? Okay.
Yeah, so about the tutorial that you said that some players need the tutorial and some don't, and if they lose the like experience of figuring it out themselves, it might like reduce the intrinsic motivation. But have you tried asking the players if they want the tutorial or not? Can you trust them, and would that have an effect on intrinsic motivation? Do you have any idea?
Well, that's an interesting thought. Like, why not? Like, well, maybe, yeah. I mean, we could ask in the beginning of the game, do you want to have a tutorial? But like, we haven't tested that. I don't remember any project before actually that we would have tested that. It's especially in mobile games. I guess it's like because that's in AAA games. Yeah, you can kind of like just skip it if you know it. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So in this case, like the player doesn't know what they actually should want. So we should, as a designer, show them that hey, you need this. But I think then the solution would be just to do it nicely, kind of not force it, but like do a conditional tutorial, I guess. Yeah, so I can repeat that if so. Basically, in merge management, we do this thing that we have predetermined items that we give to the player that it like feels like it's random, but it's kind of we teach the player, or do we try to be smart and teach the player that seems to work pretty okay. one more.
Yeah. So discovery, that's like the main motivation, the main need, if I understood you correctly. How did you stumble upon it? So did you, like, as a team, figure it out? Did you test it, validate, or did it come from the players when you were testing? Or
Good question. Also, I think that's mainly because uh, even before I joined the team, there were actually done quite substantial testing, like what works and what doesn't, and the mystery was a really big part that kind of resonated with this audience. Our audience is mostly female players. Uh, I think it comes from there because mystery and discovery, they kind of go really well together, and then the whole merge genre, like you're just discovering the next and the next and the next item, and it just goes on. So yeah, I think that's where it actually came from.
it totally works. You just need to get into the groove of it. But if you happen to kind of drop for a while, then it's really painful to start over. So you actually don't want to drop because the learning curve again is. I'm a player, so.
That's nice to hear. All right, thank you.
Thank you. No, it's okay. All right, just making sure. All right, can you hear me okay? I can use this thing here. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Collin. I will talk a little bit about, actually quite a lot. I hope not too much. I have a lot of content here. I realize that it might be too much for the 30 minutes roughly that I slotted in here, but I might browse over a few things, and then later on you can take a look at the text. But we're going to talk about Merge Friends post-mortem. Right now I'm working as, does this work? Yes. Right now I'm a game lead at Papukaya, which is a Supercell-backed small startup founded about 2 years ago to look at the underserved audiences, casual gamers who don't identify as gamers. I worked at Skunkworks, which is the whole talk about, co-founded that with a group of Oli, for example, here. Hello, Oli. Yeah, I'm going to call you out, that's right. There's some others here there as well. Karita has worked there, so just name dropping. But I got my start at Digital Chocolate, working in free-to-play games, and I've been around for 10 years doing a variety of design and product roles. And now I'm doing game lead, and we're early stage, still looking at the market, figuring out what to do next. This is not responding. Do I have to do this? Okay. A few things. So this postmortem is a design and product perspective, so I'm not going to go too much into other aspects, how for example, the culture or maybe some of the stuff like financial stuff will necessarily be talked about because it relates to a free-to-play game and how a free-to-play game is developed. But yeah, I'm mainly looking at it from that perspective and somewhat trying to ignore the other challenges that were with the company. So yeah, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to talk about those like separately, and because we have for example, we did a post-mortem of the company, and we've actually really did a lot of thought about what are the things that we didn't do correctly there. The other thing is this doesn't really respond. That's and my hope is that you can take some nuggets, these design things, and we'll learn from them, because that's the whole point. So there were some failures, there were things that we didn't do right, and I just take those, and I hope that you will then take those to the next project. And lastly, this is very text-heavy, so there are actually two reasons. So one is that I want this to be like a document that people then can share, and they don't have to link to a video, that you can just go back and say, oh, hey, let's see, here are some of the stats. The other very more selfish reason is that, I'm slightly lazy. I didn't want to do all the presentation stuff, so I made it all in the text heavy, so that way. I'm being very honest. I have a kid, so the whole life as a father is a new thing for me, and lack of sleep is a real problem, so bear with me. Why is all this important? Why are you here? Why am I presenting this? And why do I think you should know more about Merge Friends and the life and the death of Merge Friends? Actually, very first thing. This does not work. Do I really have to do this? Okay. I like it over here. Maybe I'll go over here. So this is actually a textbook example of I think what a lot of us are already going through, which is the issues with like following in the gaming industry getting more competitive, and let's say there's a new game that comes out and you're super excited about it, that genre, you can think you can make a game for that, and you fast follow. That's exactly what we did. There's another presentation which I gave, what was that, August? I can't remember. That was 2021. 2021 in the summertime. Joachim's Elite Game Developers, and I talked a lot about how fast it was for us to develop the game. It took us 8 weeks, roughly 2 months, to get the game from. Actually, I'll go into it more in detail. But yeah, it was really fast. But unfortunately, we weren't able to capture that. So it gives an idea of what not to do in some ways. You take a lot of make a lot of short-term decisions in order to get the game out fast, but then unfortunately, if you're not thinking long-term, it can come back to bite you in the butt. Then I think this is what I was mentioning, was that the capital markets, for example, are tightening up, and then all of this is in this post-IDFA landscape of UA and how competitive it is now, and how ridiculously high some of the CPIs are. And this is exactly what we felt. We felt that the CPIs were so high, and for us to compete with all the other big games, it became a really big issue. And then when we started to look for funding to sort of support the game and grow the game, it became really difficult, because, yeah, there was a lack of interest in investing in companies that weren't profit focused. It used to be growth, but now it was focused on profit, and so that was an issue. And then, yeah, it was a modest startup success story. So we actually had a point where we were living pretty much paycheck to paycheck, very small paychecks, and we were close to not just shuttering down. But then we managed to sneak in with this lifeline with Merge Friends. We got overall 5.6 million lifetime funding, and the game itself raised roughly about 4.5 million, give or take. And yeah, it's sometimes you get a game that's out there and or you get a company and then it flops like right away. Like you're not able to make any game possible, or any success. But at least this is a way that we at least got somewhere, modest success. And then lastly is just an example, and I think this is what a main takeaway is to look at the strategy of Merge Mansion, for example, and there are some really good examples of opportunities that are available for a company that is really ambitious, looking for something that would change the industry. And I think this is an opportunity for you to look into if you're a game development studio. So, I'm going to assume, like Ari, that you already know a lot about Merge games, but what you probably haven't seen is a really good breakdown of all the releases of Merge games. So I'm going to give you a snapshot just to show you how it's played over time. I won't go into pre-Merge Dragons because there are like a whole bunch of Merge games there, but they're not really relevant in this conversation, just because the game economies are so different. They tend to be a bit more casual experiences. But yeah, if you want more, you can check out the presentation. So, I don't get this. I feel like it's one of those moments that I need to be smarter than the... Okay. Maybe I just need to stand here. So yeah, here's overall life timeline of Merge games. And then on the bottom row, you can see these are the amount of games in the genre. So this includes both Merge 3 and then Merge 2 games. So the very first one is Merge Dragons, which I assume all of you know really well. But it wasn't until, so that's the blue line that you see up at the top. It wasn't actually until about 2.5 years later, which the same company, Gram Games, came out with Merge Magic. And it actually wasn't, it took a really long time. And if you played that game, you probably understand why, because it's an insane beast of a game to first create all the art for it, but also just to manage the whole board. And they also have a collection mechanic in that, which is, it is a very difficult, and I can see it as a big hurdle for gaming studios to enter into this one. And then we have Evermerge, which kind of had a slight twist on the merge genre. So it didn't have the dragon mechanic. So anyway, I won't go too deep in this. I would love to talk like specifically about all the mechanics, but I'm not going to do that because it's so fun. But I won't. And then we have Merge Gardens, and which kind of it took something from Merge Dragons, which was the level-based progression, and it turned it into Match 3, and then you have a Match 3 game, and then you also have the Merge board. And then in comes Merge Mansion. And it's actually very interesting how many people got excited about this. There's so many companies, and I remember thinking at this time, like, this is a gold rush. It was like, wow, this is an amazing game mechanic, and it's actually quite easy to create a game for this. There are a number of reasons. The fact that you have a single board, and yeah, you're only merging 2 items, and yeah, there are some things with the production that I think make it a lot easier. There are a whole slew of games came out. Merge Friends, for example, came out with. There's Love and Pies. There's Travel Town, Merge Dome, Merge Villa, Merge Inn, and then the last one was Sunny Vale, Merge Manor, and then Love and Pies, as I mentioned. And then there's also some other newcomers that came. Anyways, there's a lot of games that are now out there, so it's no longer the blue ocean that it once was. So if you're thinking now, oh, I'm gonna make a Merge game, probably need to think a little bit more. Actually, I have some thoughts about that at the end. So that gives you a recap. As you can see, it got really, really competitive really fast for us. So now we go into the actual learnings. This was actually just the preamble, so I should probably speed this thing up. Yes, so what went well? This thing, is it the battery, or am I just technically not inclined? So, what I mentioned earlier, scrappy design and development, it took us 8 weeks to develop Merge Friends. We were working on a game called Emma's Kitchen, and then we delivered Merge Friends really quickly. Had the idea, it was like, we had an Excel sheet, I think that we were talking about with me and Oli. Oli was the other counterpart designer. We worked together along with another programmer to develop the game. And this was the actual retention. I managed to save this from a screenshot directly from Facebook Analytics. You can see the second column there is the day 1 retention. There's 78, 70, 72, 80%, and these are 200, 100-day user per day cohorts. So when it was quite shocking, needless to say, that when you put a game out there and you get this kind of thing, you're like, what the heck? This must be a mistake. So we obviously reran it. It wasn't a mistake. And we knew we had something. And so when we went to investors, it was obviously easy sell in order to get funding because we had a hit on our hands. And this is just like a look back at the development. So this is like some of the first. There you can see the board here where it looks really ugly. I remember the cheeses. Some inside jokes here. And then this was the board, a single board, and then we had this task, some early concepts of what it would look like. And then this was the MVP, and actually it looks really, really super ugly. If I do say so myself, it looks like quite bad, but this was the game that we end up launching and got this retention because the core mechanic is so sticky. So what went well? So there were some key design decisions. First one was the theme and premise. So we chose a theme that we felt, okay, it wasn't out there yet, and there are plenty of other games, successful games in the market that have that theme. So this is the city building theme. And yeah, the idea was to create something, a cohesive experience. We had the early first-time user flow, and then item design, so focusing on usability. And then the last one is the daily tasks, and I'll go into each of these now. I think this battery is broken. Okay, so here's the core loop. You merge stuff to complete tasks, and you spawn more items. So that's like the main goal. You're as Ari alluded to, is that the intrinsic motivation, the desire to see new items and how they are, how the rest of the game will expand. That's kind of the main motivation. The completing the tasks actually wasn't a major thing. We didn't have very much visual progression, but the one thing that we did have was the early visual progression. And you can see that there's a small GIF. Can't see all the details, but you slowly rebuild the shop. So the idea was to create context and meaning. So you are basically taking these items, and this is what the benefit, I think, of merge and casual merge is that the items that you were actually creating in the core gameplay are used directly in the metagame, in this kind of like a longer progression. In the casual games, you have this. Like you get stars, which then fix things up. And this one, you're actually like you're getting the items which you can use directly. And then just for progression, they all need to be like level up so that they feel that they're an evolution of the previous one. Because it feels lame if you get a glove and then the glove turns into something that's not as cool or more complex. So we start with something simple and then visually and both thematically. And more rare, I think, also, like, is it something that in the player's mind do they think about all the time? So those are some of the areas. And then we need to pace all of this thing. So, for example, board space, we had tightly controlled by unlock. So we don't want the board to expand too much where there's too many items for the players to manage. So we actually had these XP zones that you open up that we just borrowed from all the other games. How you unlock a space. This helped to create a more compact experience and give players less to kind of control so that they're not overwhelmed with how many options there are on the board. The new creators we unlocked through the board. So when they were, we tried to cut, like this one, for example, the cleaning and the tools. It didn't spawn anything new. Like it was these were the items that came at the cleaning chain, the tools chain. They didn't have anything else. It was basically the point here was to lock the creators so that new items wouldn't come out. And then the new item chains, they come from the creators. So the new creators come from when you unlock board spaces, and then the item chains come from those creators. And then last one is the item chains. Item chests, which come from the XP. So we gate those by locking those later. But yeah, so the main point here is that we did a really good job of kind of controlling the experience. We actually did quite a lot of iterations of this. Ole will attest to how many times he went through the first-time user experience and getting this right. So yeah, then we had the meaningful merge, what I mentioned. So we try to create the context for a merge game. So we had the initial setup. What you see here is that you're rebuilding the store. Then we create the characters that live in the town that you're serving, and then you deliver them goods. So it's creating the overall premise, the setup of the game. And then finally you have the overall town where you can see all the progression. You can see all the characters in their town. There's a lot of things that we could have done more with the town screen, but this is where it was at. All right. And then this is something that we, like, I think me and Oli, we obviously are biased for this, but this is something that I think we did really well, was just tying the usability of the item. So you can see cleaning and tools, they come from the toolbox. And then you have the shopping. You know exactly what's coming out of these. There's clothes already. Okay, there's pets. There's other things that I can buy. And then there's the veggies that come from the grocery cart. And the whole idea here was that, for example, when a player returns to the game, which Leska, you mentioned, when a player returns to the game, they can see the creators and they know exactly where they're coming from. Because I think for a lot of players, if you're returning to the game after 2 or 3 days, you might forget actually, hey, where do these items come from? And then especially if multiples of these, if you only have 3, that's pretty manageable. But then if you have 6 or 7 different types of creators at any one time, it can be quite difficult. And then you start to get into the events, or then if you get later in the game and you run out of things to try to figure out, like, okay, what's another creator, you might find there's one like kind of similar that maybe might have the same functionality, and then that's where it starts to get really tricky. But yeah, we prided ourselves on this, and I think the main idea here was just to make it super easy for players to complete tasks. And then the daily task is the last one. So this is something that was actually one of the first features that we released. We had basically, the idea is that you have a task chain that at the end of the task chain you will get a reward. So this is a chest, and the chest is something that we didn't really tell what the player to the player what it was. We ended up using it as a tool to give more currencies, more advanced currencies, and then also tied into the seasonal content. Yeah, and one of the things is that each day of the week had the same tasks. So that on Monday, you had the same items that are needed. So we did some studies from the 12 traits, and we saw, so 12 traits is a user psychological profile company, and we used that information. The players really like to be prepared. So we took that, hey, let's create a feature which allows us to then tap into that. And players can then prepare in advance on Monday, for example, to complete these tasks. Yeah, and then it allowed us to have a semblance of live ops. This was like probably, so this was December roughly 2020, so very early on, early stages. And then, yeah, the tasks were eventually reskinned, so we're able to like quite quickly create something from, for example, we had like, there's a beach task, for example, daily task. Then we would, during the beach time, for the summertime, we would change these all into beach reskin. All right. And then I actually had a feature idea, which we tossed around quite a few ideas about this, which was like daily task streak feature. So then you try to keep your streak alive, and then you get bonuses, and like that's more just a little nugget for anyone who's interested. So yeah, now all of the positives. Now I'll go into the negatives. We're doing well. Yeah, so I think one thing that I'll really point out here is the lack of long-term progression. So you saw that there was, we mentioned that there was a really good first-time user experience, but we didn't really have anything other than that initial first visual progression for the players to do. We didn't have, other than, of course, the visual progression from the items themselves, right? The item chains are obviously something in themselves. But that was the main issue for the long-term progression. We could have borrowed from existing, and I think this is something that, like in retrospect, seems kind of obvious. But then, when you think about where we were, and also maybe the team and the experience level, it would have been quite a big undertaking for us as a small studio to build out the pipelines in order to create the content for this. For example, if you've played this is Royal Match. There is another gaming company, Merge Game, who did something similar. That's something that probably would, in retrospect, taken a look at. But there were no guarantees. This also has a lot of cons, for example, which we talked with Ari about, that For example, you don't see all of the visual progression here, so it's only a snapshot. You get to see the whole place build out, but then it goes away, and then you move on to the next one. So it has some negative sides as well. Then live ops, I think this is something that I also mentioned in some ways, that we went into live ops, I would say, too early. I know this sounds maybe slightly counterintuitive, but if you don't have the foundational systems in place, for example, we didn't have the design of like how we're actually going to live ops, what is the content, which I'm going to mention. So this is called what, in my mind, is a variant. So you have something in the game, and then it might have some variant, whether that's numbers. So like say you have an item and it has some stats, or then it's visuals. So then it's a variant. We didn't really know what our variants in the game. We had some different ideas about the items, and the item chains could be variants. So you maybe have an event, and then one of the existing item chains turns into something else, and then for that period of time. Like that was one idea how we had thought about. There wasn't, one thing is that there wasn't really clear precedence for this in the Merge 2 space, so there wasn't too much, well, actually there were no games, when we were working on this, there were no games running actually live ops, so this was something that we had to kind of like design as we were going. And then one obvious tool I think in retrospect we misused was the second board. So in Merge Friends you have one board which you start off with, but at level 20 you can open up another board, and that's like, what is it? It's like 2 weeks? How many? It's like, yeah, a week or two, yeah, roughly, into the game. We could have taken that second board and then repurposed it for a seasonal board. So it could have been just used, hey, this is something that as a new content comes in here. Also has its negatives, but I think the second board has a whole slew of challenges of moving items back and forth, not to mention even more board space that the player has to use, and they're not seeing which board is, they have one board and then they have another board anyways. Yes. And then lastly, yeah, it wasn't really until the end we started to get a flow. I wasn't really in the project at that towards the end, but there was some really good stuff by Kride, for example, putting some really cool rhythm with the events at the end, tying some of the high-end level items, turning those into spawners, so it encouraged players to merge those to the end. Yeah, had a good impact. This is all right, and then I think this is something that I alluded to in the LinkedIn post. We had a lack of timely monetization focused features, and also the clans feature, which we ended up working on. Or we couldn't see the impact through. By the time that the feature actually came out, it was already too late. And yeah, we weren't able to scale the game with competitors entering in the space. This is just a graph here of a timeline of you can look at this later more in detail, but pretty much here, when you start to see the ROAS numbers drop below 100%, that's where we started to see all the other game competitors come in, and then you see this is lifetime and also projected ROAS. So this is 60%, and unfortunately can't make a business on that. Yeah, and then more about the clans feature. So we could have focused on the monetization, and I'll highlight this actually in the things to do in the future. It took us roughly about 5 months from concept to actually scaled release, and it really turned out to be the feature that we could have, if we had taken those resources and put them into something else, it would have been, I mean, obviously, in retrospect, you're like, oh yeah, I'm so smart and I know all these things, but it's possible that it definitely didn't help us. I think I can say that for sure. Yeah. I mean, especially if you're working on something for 5 months, you need to see at least some kind of return, and we could have focused on other things that the players actually wanted, and also the monetization, for example, could have been worked on. Yeah, and yeah, I'm being honest here. Like, I think for me, it was a really wake up call when I started to think about the decision making at the time, and it's a realization of just how complicated I guess the building a mobile game is, mobile free to play game, and how many factors you have to do. Not to mention if you're working as a team lead. And then all the factors of running and building a new company. Those are all, I won't make too many excuses, but there's a lot of things that you have to kind of get right in order to be successful. So yeah, I didn't maybe just in retrospect understand the scale in which we needed to create content. I think that's obvious now. And then also I think the other point here is I want to make, which won't let me, we didn't have an eye on the finances, so it was something that this is where I'm going into a bit of the company struggles. We didn't have a single person, an owner, who was taking a look at the unit costs of a game. So this is like if you're running a game and you want to generate revenue, how much does it cost? Our team grew quite fast, and then unfortunately the revenue did not. So yeah. And yes. So in the future, I'll try to speed this one up. Respect the goal and cohort. This is something that I think maybe I underestimated, but then I also felt like we had spent so much time and energy and money into this game that like I just felt, oh, this is going to continue. But then you start seeing small signs that, like, for example, the ROAS just randomly drops, and you're like, wait, what happened? And then you start to see that, okay, well, actually there's a pool of users that you do actually see in there that perform extremely well, and then that will run dry. So if you're in a high moment, you need to prepare for an eventuality that the game's baseline will be seen. And until you get there, you should not be scaling your game. Like, I think it's just, like, if you don't know the actual baseline, if you're not continually trying to scale the game and you're not pushing the boundaries, the recommendation would be just not scale the team, for example. Those are long-term costs, and they're harder to get rid of. So yeah, as a cost, not as a person. Yeah. I say that so cavalier, like, oh yeah, just get rid of them. I'm glad you guys are laughing. Yeah, you're. Yeah, exactly, right. All right, let's move on. All right. Yeah. So think about what's next for the genre. So I highlighted this. Do not copy Merge Mansion. So I think there's a lot of space in the area, and there's Merge Dragons. If you just look at that game has so many flaws and so many areas which you can just look at that game and then take a variant from it. Like Evermerge did this. I'll actually highlight a few of these, and then given the state of UA, like, you need to find something that like really stands out. You can do that in a variety of ways, whether it's IP or maybe you have a theme or fantasy that's new to the genre or new to the market. But can you communicate that in 5 seconds? Like, can you get that point? Why should a player play this game in 5 seconds? It needs to be that fast. Yeah, and then of course you can do the organics, but that's a whole different beast of trying to find something that is sort of viral. But yeah, so here are some, I guess, since I'm not really working on merge games right now, maybe I don't know, maybe I am. Is one thing is about the tight board space. That is a complaint that I've met, and it obviously has like their reasons, design reasons why they exist, and there are ways, for example, like selling items, which Ari said that sucks. Is there a way to make that actually more enjoyable or more fun, or tie it into somehow to the game more, that maybe you get currency every time that you sell it, or just find some way to innovate on that. That alone probably is not going to be enough. But then there's the board and meta space of being separate. So in merge games, casual merge, you have the board, and then you have the place where you're building. In Merge Dragons, they're the same. So is there not an area in there that you could have, that there could be actually a merged board or casual merge board that actually then you're building and repairing things on that board itself. Then the depths of spend. So I think this is really tapping into like the idea of character collection. Are there other metas that could be used? I think there's a whole bunch of opportunities there. I can't exactly remember what I was thinking there, but the last one, and this is something that we dealt with, was the lack of pinch points and lack of high leverage points in merge games, because you can kind of continue unending. Obviously, you have their energy. It's really engaging feature, but there isn't a moment where you really can't do anything. And this, like having a really high leverage point, like a level base, for example. Could there be a level based merge game? I mean, it already exists in Merge Dragons. Why can't you just take that? That seems like a no-brainer, obvious thing to at least try. Somebody, please. Yeah. We actually did that, but it failed. But I know why it failed, so this is what you do. You just try something and learn. It's not a trap. Yeah, exactly. Two last points here. I know we're running out of time. We are way over time, but spreadsheet design. So this is actually more like development focused and just something that I think just working in the industry and like being around a whole bunch of really smart people I've absorbed, which is spreadsheet design, ASAP. Like, I mean, like literally, if you have any design in your head, put it in a spreadsheet. What it does is it helps to structure the data. You can define what are the variants, for example. It also makes easier the connections between other things, other systems within the game. So let's say you have a sheet with items, and then you have a sheet with buildings. You can also figure out what kind of assets you might need. It really helps to define things really clearly. Spreadsheets are just really fun as well. I don't know if this is a common sentiment here, but I really like spreadsheets, so definitely do that. Yeah, I highlighted all this stuff. Yes. I don't know why I'm pointing. Why did I? I'm getting tired here, obviously. And then, yeah, along with this, if you're working in a prototype, wireframe it. Also, ASAP. Like, it should be part of your overall design process. You think of, you have some idea for some game, you start thinking, okay, like, what is it going to look like? Like, you're creating an interactive experience. You might think that, oh yeah, this makes sense in my head, and you have an idea of it, but then unless you're actually thinking about the layouts and putting it on paper, it just might not work. And you might find that, oh, actually, the things that I tried in my head, actually, when I think about navigating, they just don't work. So that's what I would recommend. And that's what we do now. As soon as possible, I try to think of both spreadsheets and then also the wireframes of the game. And that's it. Thank you so much. I also want to just really quickly thank Oli and Kride, and also Venle, who isn't here, who helped me with this presentation. I asked them a lot of stuff, and in some cases even like copied and pasted some of their answers. So thanks. Any questions? Yes. Yeah, he's coming here. Yeah, actually, I didn't explain that. Yeah. So I think when you're a small startup and you're looking for funding, one of the mistakes you might do is to try to, I guess, market the game in some ways as, how do I say this? Like you use a tagline to sort of define the game, right? And our tagline was, we will be the first social game. We have Merge Friends actually in the title, so it was kind of like intuitive. And we kind of thought like it would make sense to have social in the game. Like I think like marketing-wise, and I think the message that we sent to players made sense. It just didn't make sense at the moment. And I think if we would have obviously focused on monetization, had more time to do that, then there are some things that we could have done. And I think, that was the main reason why we went into it. But also we were, sort of naive, and we thought it wouldn't take that long. I thought it was gonna be like maybe 2 months, but with all the technical things, and we also did it during Christmas time. Like we started in September, and then once Christmas came, it was like ended up being in February, which is unfortunate. But that's why we did it. Yeah, nothing more like we actually one thing that I'll mention. Yeah, so one thing that was a mixed message that we saw was that our players seemed to want to have a collaborative game experience. That was the data that we saw from 12 Trades with this tool. So there were inclinations. There are obviously signs that the audience would like a collaborative experience. So I'm not saying that the feature wouldn't work, but I'm just saying the timing of the feature probably would have done it obviously later when the game's foundation has been kind of built up. Yeah, thanks.
Does this work? Yeah. I was just gonna ask.
Who are you gonna ask a tough question, aren't you?
Yeah, would you say that the need, for this feature were actually that, would you call it
intrinsically
marketing?
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there are many ways that we could have taken it. I think also, just from experience-wise, just building a social feature, a clan feature, is it's an incredibly large amount of work. And then not understanding that, okay, we need to build first all of the systems for this feature, and then only then can we then tap into the more collaborative features, right? We get a Teams feature, but then you can't really do anything with it. Then it's just, I can just join a clan to send gifts. We had gifts, and that it just wasn't enough. So yeah, yes. Yes. So cheer wave. That was the gift.
So yeah, you mentioned about the clans being the one thing that kind of caused all the tumble. But at the start, did you have a single thing that really got you to the somewhat success that you had at the very beginning? Was it something accidental, or was it something that you saw that, hey, no one's doing this, let's do this?
I mean, being in the market early on, I think helped. As much as I'm saying that it sucked to have all these long-term problems, just being there first. I mean, we were one of the very first to come out. There was Travel Town, who was faster than us, but I think we were obviously merge management, of course. But yeah, I think there were some key differences. Obviously, the theme, what I mentioned, it wasn't done. There were no other games because the space was still wide open. It was okay, well, let's do a theme that most players are already playing. If they're playing any of the crafting simulation games, they're already familiar with Township and Heyday, all of these games. So let's just take something from there that they already know. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, other than the game, to be honest, it's really simple. If you find a really great mechanic that is fun and engaging, and you copy it, unless you're royally messing it up somehow, then it's I mean, there are companies that have done that, but if you take something and you're fast following, then you're gonna find success. I mean, that's hard to say because there are obviously so many factors. So corner. We need that. Don't they have that thing that you can throw? We could throw the mics. Is that okay? Let's not. Okay, I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah, thanks for the talk.
Thank you.
How fast did you scale in the beginning? Because if you kind of started really fast, and what happened then, and how much the game did evolve in the early phase, because you kind of got that kind of quick start to start with.
Yeah. this was when we first launched this MVP version. This was August of 2020, and then we didn't global launch, so we didn't release to all countries and start scaling until March of 2021. So it was, what is that, 6 months? Yeah. So that's we did during that time. We did the daily task feature. We also did some improvements to the. That was also the time when we added the early first-time user experience, like polished that and tried to improve that. Actually, I have. Maybe I could add that. Actually, there's a timeline that I did for all of the features that we released. I don't know why I didn't put it here, but I could add that into this slide to learn more about the actual releases of the features.
And how many people you were then in the?
Oh yeah, I also have that data. Yeah, so when we were with the MVP, we were 5, I guess, 5 or 6. Yeah. And then global launch, geez, I don't remember. Do you remember, Oli? Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't that much. Like we were still like relatively small scale. But then, when we started moving into the later of the year, when we started to get more financing, like there's a really nice. Actually, I have a really nice breakdown of all the timeline of the events of the company, and it shows actually the headcount and everything. I need to check to see if that makes sense to share, but that's something.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I can also I can look at it and then we can talk later as well. Are you guys getting tired? I'm like, okay, go ahead, yeah. Let's do 2 more and then we can, if you want to have, if you ask questions, or if you have more questions, you can ask me later.
Yes, so maybe one more. I'm curious about one more example because the development was so fast, 8 weeks. So was there something specifically that you hope you had designed on a high level further, or something that fight your behind later on, like you said? You gave a couple of examples. But.
Yeah, I mean, I think the really clear thing is that we didn't really understand what to do after the initial first-time user experience. Like, to be honest, I think a lot of the mentality was, and I don't know if it's like that wrong, but the mentality was that it was enough to have another merge board and more items that you could merge. But that was also with the idea that I didn't want to scale the team. Like mentally, I wasn't like, okay, I don't want to scale it. But it's a dishonest idea, because if you're gonna scale the game, if you're gonna do a free-to-play game, you're gonna have to get people to make the content. Like it's part of it. Like it's part of the, part of the business. So having a more, I don't know, I guess production, like mentality in that way of like understanding, okay, how much content do we actually need and what would be the actual content. I think I was also flip-flopping in many decisions about that. So then just not making a choice and then ending up not having anything. So, which is unfortunate. Yeah. Maybe that's last one. You're gonna have 2 questions? Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah, and then
One that interests me personally is like, what was the choice? Because you, in the beginning of the game, you had like this fixing of the cafeteria or something.
Yeah.
But then that kind of was it, and then it kind of changed the whole meta to just filling the orders. So was there like a conscious decision not to do more, or was there any? And if you remember the data, was there any? Did that affect anything? Because it feels like the game could have more of that thing,
Yeah, I think we're honestly just in firefighting mode at that point, like trying to, like we're at this point where we were just trying to deliver something as fast as possible, go to global, and then shore up all of the, like for example, which we talked about, like the sheets, the configs, for example, that took longer than I had hoped. And then So yeah, yeah, that's actually the so. I mean, it's so hard. I think. How do I say this without like? Yeah, it's a difficult thing if you don't have experience working in the free to play production pipeline. If let's say you don't have the talents within the, and then you're trying to figure out how to do that. I think that was an unfortunate thing. Yeah, that we just didn't have. We just didn't have that capabilities. Let's just say that. Yeah. All right, last one, and then if you have more questions, you can.
Yeah.
take them
So
aside.
in the initial MVP stage of 8 weeks, were there things that you thought that you did too fast? That like just with a little bit of more digging, you would have actually like gained a lot more traction.
No. I mean, the thing was that when we saw the data, we were like, wow, like it was so high that it was like we didn't have that feeling. But I mean, just generally, like putting a game that fast, like the architecture of that game was it was spaghetti code. Like no, like it was so hard. We were, and I think still at the very end, we were suffering from that. So like, if there was one, let's say, takeaway, and I think I could also have put that here, was that if you have an MVP, if the MVP seems successful, like okay, you pause it. This is it's hard to make generalities, but in our case, I think it would have helped us tremendously to say, okay, now we see that this is successful. Let's rebuild the backend for or build the foundation of the code to make it more sustainable, so that we can then build features faster later on. You do bite into some of the production that building out features, but that I think at that stage, since we had a solid product, that it would have made sense. So yeah, maybe just the underlying foundation technical side of it. So, um, hmm. Yeah, that's why I said, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's true. Yeah, yep. Yeah, I mean that's why I said like it's so hard to make generalities. I think just but retrospectively and obviously like hindsight is 2020 in this is that it would have helped us tremendously in the long term. But then yeah, who knows? Like roll of the dice basically. Yeah, exactly. Shut up. Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's it. I did want to really quickly just mention. So we'll do, networking if you still have the energy for it. I know you've been sitting down. We do. There's snacks. I just want to mention we actually have we have 3 events roughly in the pipeline. We haven't nailed down the exact dates, but I just wanted to share these. We have tentatively an event booked at the Supercell office, mainly focused on bringing more representation for women. So we will have only women panel. It's either going to be a panel or maybe a presentation, designers. So if you know somebody who would like to give a presentation or have something interesting, or come talk to me if you want to. That would be great. We also have an idea of doing a more interactive setting, so having something where we have roundtables and we talk about specific things. And then last one was, what was that? I don't remember. Do you remember? Yes, the narrative one. Yes, and that maybe we'll see. Most likely, we'll see the timing. But just want to share those so you have an idea of what's coming up. Well, that's it. Thank you so much.